It is 23 minutes after the hour of 6 o'clock. You are inside the Now Morning Show. And of course, we have on Zoom with us this morning the Minister of Works and Transport, Rohan Sinanan, to talk to us about the flash flooding that occurred in North Trinidad yesterday as a result of rains. Good morning to you, Minister.
Good morning, Natalie. Good morning to your co-host. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the best morning show in Trinidad and Tobago and across the Caribbean, even if I say so myself. Yeah, no kind of modesty whatsoever this morning. So, Minister, really...
Go ahead.
No. Go ahead with the compliment. Don't let us stop you.
Modesty, nothing.
No, I see. I have to be careful with my compliment this morning on that because I think I have another morning show, and next thing they cut me off if I continue your compliment. So let me just say, Natalie, I enjoy being on your program.
Oh, thank you. We don't want them to disconnect the call at all. But, Minister, on a more serious note, though, we had a lot of flooding in Maraval, Saiva area yesterday. You know, and I think we can get to the point, you know, and skip the conversation just to the point where we recognize that we're having more than usual rainfalls in Trinidad and Tobago as we've been having over the past year from time to time. So then, you know, the question becomes, as a result of the flooding, recognizing where we are, what are we going to be doing now or going forward to accommodate the kind of rainfalls that we've been getting?
Okay, Natalie, you're quite correct. It's a different type of rainfall, and it has been happening for the last couple of years. I think this new pattern actually started in 2016 when we started to see annually an increase in the rainfall, but more importantly, we saw some severe downpours concentrated in certain areas, and that have been moving. Remember last year we got a downpour on several occasions in the Arouca Twin City area, and when the entire country was dry, the Arouca Twin City area was actually flooding out day after day. We see it happening in the Southland. Yesterday we saw it happening in the St. Anne's, Maraval catchment area, not Diego Martin, not in the Sealots area, just in the Maraval, St. Anne's, Cascade catchment area. This is not a phenomena just happening here in Trinidad, it is happening throughout the world. You saw flooding in China, in England, in Australia, you name it, it's happening all over the world. It's the new norm on the rain pattern.
Right.
And it is something that we have to do our part. We have to look at our channels. We have to look at how we store water and how we release the water back into our channels, because we do have a lot of limitations in our channels in Trinidad. We have development close to our riverbank, so there's no room to expand the channels. And that is why we have engaged the Andean Development Bank since 2018 and to come up with some strategies for us. They took all our plans and so all the studies we did, and they have only last week, gave us some preliminary, not necessarily drawings, but we had the first briefing with them to chart a way forward. It's a progress, our work is still in progress, and we are hoping coming out of that project, we can find ways to minimize flooding going forward. There's a new norm. It is something that we're going to have to learn to live with. And when I say learn to live with, if you look at what happened yesterday on South Key, you had a lot of debris coming down from hills. So what it meant is that people are still cutting the hills. We had our silt traps within half an hour been filled with silt. I saw a river last night in Cascade where there was no river. It was just filled with sand and silt from the mountain. What it meant is that people are still cutting the mountains higher up. So we have to understand the effects of what we do, and we have to understand that, you know, flooding is going to be something we're going to have to live with. We'll have to find a way to minimize the flooding. The government will do its part, but I think the population will have to understand that we all have a responsibility going forward.
Well,
this is
Minister,
basically the new norm.
Let us talk. So yes, and that's why my first question to you was, know that we've recognized that this is where we are. What are we going to do differently? And you referenced the Andean Development Bank. Talk to us about that meeting last week. You know, what is that looking like in terms of the plans going forward for Trinidad and Tobago in terms of its capacity to hold this kind of water that we have to deal with now?
Okay, so that the project that we're doing with them, obviously it's a project that will have to go to cabinet once they're complete with the study and so, but it is all about looking at new channels, looking at the areas where we have small culverts, where we have certain bridges that we'll have to change, also where we can have some retention dams, where we can hold the water and then release it back into the channels, looking at areas where we may have to put in much larger pumps. So it's a whole project throughout Trinidad. What this country had several studies before. We did the Caroni Basin study, the Oroput study, you name it. The only area that there was no study done was the Western Peninsula, so and downtown Port of Spain. So we have asked them to take all our plans and incorporate a downtown study and also the Western Peninsula, and let us come up with an operational plan where we can start to look at the low-hanging fruits, and we have a short-term, medium-term, and long-term. And once we have that approved and by the cabinet, this calls for a lot of funding, but it's a program that could take us probably over a 10-year period. But that doesn't mean you wouldn't see the effects of it until after 10 years. Take, for instance, the Caroni project that we're doing now, the new pumps and the raising of the banks and so, that came out of a Caroni study. But those were things that could have been done immediately, and we started to do that, and we did see the benefits of that. And that is basically what we're talking about. What the CAF, we're hoping that they will do is, apart from doing the study for us, doing the engineering drawings and so, once approved, we're hoping that the funding for a project like that can also accompany the project from the Andean Development Bank.
So we're talking about several layers. We're talking about looking at something in the short term, but looking at cabinet approval, looking at funding, you know, looking at the different aspects as in probably where you all want to start first, because you're talking about, you know, trying to look at capacity building, so to speak, in terms of channels for water flow right across Trinidad and Tobago. So when do you think we'll be able to see the short-term measures of all of that, taking into consideration the approvals that might be needed and even funding?
Well, we would have started on some of the short-term plans already. If you look at the Aruca area last year, we have identified 6 areas that we need to expand on, meaning culverts that were way too small, both on the Eastern Main Road and also before the Eastern Main Road, more on the hillside, on the northern side. We would have started a project on that already. So we look in terms of wherever there's additional land. If you look at the Greenville area, 2 years ago when we got the flooding, the ministry went in and utilized all the available land to widen the Caroni River. So there are things that have already started. In the Cascade Marval area, there isn't much that we can do because a lot of that river is a walled river. There are residents living almost on the river bank. There are fences on the river bank. So there isn't much widening you could do there. But we are looking for wherever there's available space, and we are going to put a walling program in place there, but that will not help us. What will help us in that area is basically, the stopping of the cutting of the hills going higher up, because yesterday, the debris that came down to South Key, the debris that filled the drains and the rivers, most of that came from on the mountains where they were cutting.
So then talk to us about that. What can the ministry do?
Having said that, if you look at what happened yesterday, we had 30 millimeters of rainfall.
Yeah.
Within about 2 hours, which is, yes, go ahead.
Talk to us about how you can work with the Ministry of Planning, to treat with that, because again, it's not something that we're identifying for the first time, where we're seeing the hillsides being eroded, and as a result of that, the devastation that we can experience here in the lower lands of Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, we are working with the Ministry of Planning. I can tell you the first presentation we had with the Andean, the Aruca project is that we showed the Ministry of Planning. We had a session with the Ministry of Planning. We had a session with WASA. We had a session with the HDC. And it's a all of government approach to try to minimize the flooding. So we have been meeting with the Ministry of Planning. They are part and parcel of the whole solution. In most cases where you have these developments taking place, it's people who are actually doing this without any sort of approval. But having said that, we have to understand that the rainfall now is abnormal. This is not a normal type of rainfall. Yesterday we had 30 millimeters of rain within about 2 hours, which is more than what you normally get for the entire month in a rainy season.
Yeah.
So no matter what capacity you have, you will not be able to accommodate that sort of a rainfall. However, what was significant yesterday, because of the work that the ministry would have done during the dry season, within half an hour to 45 minutes, the entire water courses were low, back to their normal levels. What that meant is that the water was able to run off the land in a short space of time, which is what we are pushing for right now.
Yeah.
But once you get that sort of rainfall, it is virtually impossible to create infrastructure to manage that. We're seeing that happening in most of the developed countries in the United States, in London, Australia, England, China, that have some of the first-class infrastructure. You're seeing these sort of downpour, overtopping the water courses and so. And it is almost impossible to build infrastructure to take 1 month rainfall in 1 hour.
So, Minister, if we're talking about, this kind of rainfall and, the ability to build out this capacity over time, you know what just crossed my mind? What would have happened if we had high tide yesterday? Because we're talking about the rainfall, running off in the space of half an hour to 45 minutes, which we're absolutely grateful for. But what would have happened if we had a situation with high tide?
Well, we are living on an island, and those are some of the challenges. Now, it's nice to go and enjoy the beaches, and, we advertise, and that's how we attract our tourists and everything. But unfortunately, there are some disadvantages that come when you're living on an island. We have 2 tides in Trinidad, and we're happy yesterday that, most of this happened in the low tide, and the water was able to run off. But again, these are certain challenges and certain things that we have to live with going forward. We didn't see much. I was out late last night with the teams. A lot of work went in. Fortunately, the damage to homes was not as devastating as it could have been. So what we had yesterday is a lot of the rivers and a lot of the spillage on the roadways and so.
Talk to us about the extent of the damage.
Homes, but it could have been a lot worse.
Talk to us about the extent of the damage, Minister, and how long it took the ministry to clear the areas.
The damage that we saw yesterday again was a lot of debris on the roadways, and so a lot of trees came down into the water courses, and what we have is a lot of silt now in the water courses. As I said last night in the Cascade area, I saw an entire river filled with silt, meaning that you could not separate the river that was next to the road. It was totally silt up. So you have a lot of work like that taking place last night, clearing the roadways and so with a lot of mud and trees. I've not gotten a report so far this morning, but I would expect most of that would be cleaned, and we're going to concentrate on the water courses today. And what we're asking some of the local government who came out last night did their part, the Ministry of Works, and we're looking at the CPEP and the URP, and so to bring out some of the employees to assist the residents to do some cleaning up and to bring back some sort of normalcy today. We feel by today we should have everything under control.
Can we say, where people are in terms of electricity and water supplies?
There was some electricity challenges yesterday from what I saw on the hillside in Cascade and in Maraval, but TNTech was on site, and I'm sure by this morning everything should be back to normal, if it wasn't back to normal last night, because TNTech was out as well last night. I must say that everybody came out last night, Ministry of Local Government, the Port of Spain Corporation, and the San Juan Laventille Corporation. They did their part last night, and the Ministry of Works did their part, and whichever contractor that they had to call out, whoever, everybody was on standby, and I can tell you that up to by 9 o'clock last night, there were people all over Port of Spain doing what had to be done to ensure that today the city would have been back to normal.
Right. Well, I did hear you that you haven't gotten a report for the morning as yet to see, just where things are in terms of the cleanup efforts. But up to last night, most of it, the silting, desilting was done.
Yes, we actually started last night with the backhoes and the truck, and the main focus last night would have been to clear the roadways so that there would be no interruption this morning. They had promised me that they will complete it last night when I left them, but again, it's a work in progress. So I really feel that by today we should have some level of normalcy to all the residents in the affected areas.
Right, and you said most of it was to the roadways and stuff, but in terms of homes, could you say at this point, like, what areas were affected?
Again, the downpour was concentrated on the hillside in the Maraval, Cascades, St. Anne's area. From what I saw last night, not much water actually went into a lot of homes. There was some home damage. Actually, I saw a refrigerator sailing away, and the person told me they had it's somebody who sells ice cream, and they had just filled it up with ice cream that morning. So yes, there was some damage to residents. I saw about 2 or 3 cars in the river that actually washed down and went down into the St. Anne's River there. So you had some damage to residents, but I must say the majority of debris that we saw would have been on the roadways and in the watercourses.
And Minister, I know that a lot of the debris, you said, came from the slashing away of and the cutting of the hillsides. So what are we doing to address the issue of reforestation?
Well, again, that's another aspect of government program. We do have the reforestation program ongoing, and I know the Ministry of Agriculture can speak to that, but there is an ongoing project with the reforestation of the hillsides.
Mm-hmm. And my final question to you is, I know you also spoke to that a lot of people who are building on the hillsides are without permission. So what are the consequences to those kinds of actions?
Well, I mean, I know in speaking with the Town and Country Division, these things are being reviewed all the time, but I think the whole concept of construction with unauthorized construction is something that is on the drawing board now. It's not only on the hillside, Natalie, it's throughout the country. It's actually building on riverbanks. It's building in the low-lying areas. And you have a lot of people will complain once you go into the rainy season, because the rainy season means that we're going to get a lot of rain.
Yeah.
And what we have right now is a different type of rainfall. If you build in low-lying areas, you are going to be affected. If you build on slopes and so, with the weather pattern that we are getting now, you will more than likely get soil movements. And whenever these things happen, you cannot really expect the government to come out and compensate you. We have to now understand that there's some responsibility in construction. And you have to understand where you're constructing, and you have to construct to suit the environment, meaning even your structure has to be sound. And this has been a challenge that we would have had in the past. Unfortunately, now we are seeing the effects of it. So it's a responsibility to all that when you're building in an area, make sure you get permission to build in that area, and your structure is built to accommodate the land in that area.
Minister, I think that we have seen over the years that level of personal responsibility doesn't exist in Trinidad and Tobago, especially when a lot of people, are trying to get that security to be homeowners, trying to, get to that place where they can put their families somewhere. So if they can find somewhere towards the riverbank, they're not thinking about that. They're thinking about, listen, I bet I'm on the riverbank than I'm nowhere. So I think it's something that the government has to address, and has to address it seriously, in terms of, one, ensuring that when these things happen that there are consequences to it, I remember when, I think it was last year before the elections, we had some flooding, and I asked the Prime Minister about it, and he literally said to me that if people flood at 50 times, even if they're on the riverbanks, you have to give them relief. So that encourages to me, encourages the squatting, encourages people to do the wrong thing.
Well, again, we are looking at this seriously, because what you got away with 50 years ago, 25 years ago, clearly the weather pattern has changed and you're not going to get away with it again. So what we have recently done is that we are trying to get permission for our drainage division to enforce some of these rules. We are working with the Ministry of Public Utilities that has under the WASA Act, I think it is, has the authority to deal with these people, and also the regional corporation. We are trying to get that enforcement also in the hands of the Ministry of Works Drainage Division. And I can tell you, once we get that authority there, we will be taking serious action, because once there's a problem, the Ministry of Works is the one who's called to account all the time. So we are trying to get, as they say, we're trying to get some teeth to deal with that.
Well, Minister,
once we get that, we will be enforcing that.
All I can tell you is good luck, because to treat with a man who has nowhere else to put his family is going to be a challenge.
Well, there are places that you can. I mean, this is Trinidad and Tobago. We still have a lot of, and we do have a lot of programs in Trinidad. You know, we keep, in Trinidad, I still feel that, yes, there are people who are in need. There are people who we have to help. But there are some people who tend to put other people's lives and property in jeopardy by their action.
Yeah. Minister, we do have to leave it there, but we want to thank you so much for speaking with us this morning. And we're looking forward, as you said, there are parts of, smaller parts, the short-term measures that are being put in place, and such as the expansion of the Caroni River, as well as looking at what was done up east, and now looking at ways to expand, the Cascade area, that river up that side, St. Anne's River. But thank you so much for speaking with us this morning.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, and have a good day.
You're most welcome.